There are ideas we need to be working on. We need to working on things like electrical automobiles, electrical vehicles, how to get the windmills to power them, windmills and solar panels. This is all stuff that we need to do. Not only we can do it, but we must do it. And all along, we should have had, this is 2012, this stuff should have been done 20 years ago. Should have been finished. We should have been working on these projects in the 1970s, getting them finished in the 1980s, and it should have been 20 years ago. We should have had all this stuff. We should have had wind power and solar power powering just about everything by now. Seriously. But you tried to mention in the 1970s, even the 1980s, these things, solar power, wind power, people go, I'll just keep burning gasoline instead, not worry about it. I'll just keep burning coal. I'll just keep using nuclear power, not worry about it. Too much trouble to try to figure out how to make wind power and solar power. It'll never work. It'll never work. That was the attitude. So here we are 40 years later, when we should have had this stuff for 20, 30 years. Should have been running everything. And we're still having to treat it like it's a developing, just a new invention, a new development. Now they have the electrical vehicles that can go with these lithium batteries, can charge these motorcycle vehicles, these 3-wheel and 4-wheel electrical vehicles that can go for 100 miles, 200 miles on a charge. And we have wind turbine generators that can generate more than enough electricity to power this thing. Now when you think about what is actually happening with the wind generators, the wind is turning these windmills. What is it? Turning these propellers things on the windmill. So it's just turning the propellers around and around from the wind, and that creates an electrical charge using copper wire and magnets or something, or electromagnets, using electromagnets and copper wire. There's just the spinning of the wheel charges up these electromagnets, and all of this electricity gets sent into a battery and stored, and then you take it from the battery and release it again to make the wheels of your car turn. That's all it is. It's the wind is turning this wheel on the windmill. The energy of that windmill turning gets stored into a battery, and then the battery later releases that same energy to turn the wheels of an automobile or of a motorcycle or bicycle. That's all it is transferring of energy. So basically the wind is powering your electrical vehicle. The wind turning the propeller on the windmill in a circular motion. That this circular motion gets transferred through the intermediary stage of the battery. The same rotating motion eventually gets transferred to the wheels of your vehicle. So the wind is blowing you around the planet. That's all it comes down to. It's as simple as that. And how ridiculous. And on top of everything else, when people finally get around to creating these windmills to get free electricity without burning anything, without polluting the air, then people go around objecting and saying, oh, it's so unsightly to see these windmills and these windmill farms. They're so unsightly. It's terrible what they're doing to our pristine environment. Well, do you see these same people complaining about the damage to the pristine environment, about the burning of trillions of tons of gasoline into the atmosphere, the destruction of the ozone layers, the chopping down of the forest to create all the wood, and the soil erosion that results from that, and the strip mining to get all these, basically to get metals. You don't hear these people getting up in arms and outraged about the destruction to the pristine environment of these things are causing all the time. But somebody wants to create a windmill to get free electricity free energy that doesn't pollute the air. And people are going to suddenly get all worked up about it. And you wonder who's really funding these protests. You wonder whether the oil companies are really somehow behind the scenes, instigating this kind of protest against wind power. You have to wonder whether somewhere, if you trace it back, is going to be the influence of oil companies that are trying to instigate this rebellion and this outrage against the wind power. Seriously, all these people live on islands and wherever it is, it's Scotland or Iceland or wherever the islands are, the Shetland Islands. People making this protest, or the Orkney Island. That was the Orkney Islands. People making these protests about how terrible wind farms are going to be, especially out there on the islands in the North Sea, the Orkney Islands, the Shetland Islands, where wind is like the major. Wind is the major energy existing out there. There's just constantly wind gushing all over the ocean there, over this North Sea there, and you're on this little island, you're getting all this free wind energy, but that's also under that sea, there's also oil. So what's probably happening is these oil companies who have a very big presence up in the North Sea, whether it's the Orkneys or the Shetland Islands or off Norway, they've got a very big financial and commercial presence up there as employers. So it seems quite likely to me that they would instigate this kind of protest against the development of wind power there. So the oil spills that result from the drilling the oil, forgetting about even the burning of the gasoline and what it does to the air, to the atmosphere. Just before it even gets there, there's all these oil spills out in the ocean. What they do to the ocean, and how they destroy the wildlife there and destroy the fishing industries off Norway, Shetland Islands, Orkney Islands, Faroe Islands. Every oil spill is going to have a terrible effect on the wildlife there. But you don't see this big protest about, oh, we have to get rid of the oil companies because of what they're doing to our natural environment. But then somebody wants to build a wind farm, and there's this outrage, and there's upswelling of protest against this terrible thing of building the wind farms on the island. And I have to wonder who's really behind it, who's really instigating it, with the big presence of the oil companies off the coast of Norway and Scotland and all through the North Sea. All the oil companies are got to be the biggest employer there and the biggest financial presence there. And what a charade politics is. It's all just a fucking pantomime. That's what it really comes down to. That's why there's all these charity gestures that are made. Oh, it's a community cleanup day. It's race for this day, do for that day. All the charity and give and less fortunate and blah blah blah. It's all a big fucking goddamn pantomime. Politics is all a big fucking pantomime. The newspapers are part of the fucking pantomime, and they put on the charade of pretending that they're here to inform you, but mostly look at what they're actually throwing at you is celebrity gossip. Jennifer Aniston and Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, and we're supposed to care about all this bullshit and makeup tips and all this nonsense for this pantomime. Meanwhile, the politicians are a bunch of crooks who are ripping you off, but they shake your hand and call you their friend, and they're picking your pockets. The politicians go around picking your pockets, but they're shaking your hand looking in your eyes and smiling, and they hold out their right hand for you to shake. Meanwhile, their left hand is reaching into your wallet. And that's the charade. That's the reality. And the newspapers are part of it. The newspapers are part of playing this game of pretending to be reporting the news when all they really want to report about is celebrity gossip and just stupid gossip things. They want to ask, well, what kind of car are you going to drive if you're the mayor? That's the question the newspapers had to ask. They were asking the candidates, well, if you become mayor, will you still drive the Crown Victoria, or will you drive another vehicle? This is all they fucking care about. But what was happening in this town with the destroying of the school system, selling off the schools to real estate developers, they don't mention that. Newspapers don't mention that. They just, what kind of car are you going to drive? They just ask a bunch of superficial bullshit. So that's the pantomime of politics. And this, what you're looking at on the screen, is a little, supposedly about a 500 square foot little cabin for a little cottage on the lake for rent. It's about the size of the apartment I'm living in now, for about the same amount of money. And it's over on a lake, and it's all a separate unit, a separate little house. Very cute. Now, if this lake were like in the town that I live in, or the next town over or something, then I'd go and I'd call them right up today. But this is about 50 miles away, in the middle of the state, and is it really worth it for me to try to move 50 miles away just so I can have my own little cabin that's the same size as the place I'm in now? Is it really worth the effort of trying to move out there for that? Meanwhile, another apartment 3 streets away from me has opened up, which is $100 less per month than the place I'm in, and perhaps a slightly quieter street, maybe a more comfortable little area, in an actual residential house, instead of some kind of a human warehouse like I'm in. So if that hasn't been taken yet, if it's still available, I'm going to write to the realtor, whose name is Joan Collins. Poor woman, Joan Collins. Every day of her life, she must hear somebody say, "Oh, Joan Collins, you're the actress. Joan Collins." Ooh. She must hear that every fucking day of her fucking life, and she must be ready to kill the next person who says it, but she just learned to cope. Just smile politely and say, "Yes, well, yes, I have the same name as the actress. That's right. Yes." Anyhow, if this place down the street from me hasn't been taken, by tomorrow I'll write to her and set up a scheduled appointment to see the place on Sunday or Monday. Hooray. There's a lot of things to think about in life, and there's so many times when you try to say the things that we really need to be talking about. Things like, how do you make electrical automobiles? Such a simple concept, and for so long people were saying, and most people will still tell you, oh, an electrical automobile, it can't go very far, and it can't go very fast, and it can't be very safe, and it's not economical, and it costs too much to power it, and we don't have the technology to create that kind of electricity, and blah, blah, blah. That's the sort of shit that people say Meanwhile, there are hundreds of companies proving that all wrong, creating electrical vehicles that do work, that are economical, that are practical. So that's what we have to be doing. We have to be concerned about the future, and the future not being next month or next year, but 10 years from now, and 100 years from now, and 200 years from now, and 2,000 years from now. That's what we have to be planning for and working on. Instead of going around thinking that we can go on for the next 1,000, 2,000 years burning gasoline, it simply isn't enough gasoline, even if we wanted to do that. If we burn every gallon of gasoline in the planet, then we might be able to do so for another 30, 40, at most 50 years. We could squeeze more gasoline from under the surface of the planet. Meanwhile, destroying the surface of these reserves of oil under the surface. It's like it's a layer of the skin of the planet. And and removing all this oil and just burning it, it's like removing a sublayer of your skin. A subcutaneous layer of your skin is there that gives you a certain amount of resiliency and cushion. And if you remove that, your skin becomes too sensitive, and you bruise very easily. That's what's happening. That's what's going to happen with the planet. You remove all the gasoline from, or all the oil that's under the surface of the planet, and it's like removing the layer of skin. And the planet's going to continue to bruise more easily and be less resilient. That oil's there for a purpose. To think that it doesn't have to stay there, and we can just drill it all out and just burn it into the atmosphere is just absurd. But even if we allowed ourselves to do that, the very longest that we could possibly go on doing this might be 50, at the outside extreme, 60 years. More. So what do you think 100 years from now your grandchildren or great-grandchildren are going to be getting by with? It's going to have to be wind energy, which is inexhaustible. Wind energy is inexhaustible as long as the Earth keeps spinning, as long as the momentum of the Earth keeps it spinning and rotating on its axis and spinning around the sun, which it's been doing for 5 billion years, and it will continue to do for at least another 5 billion years. That energy is inexhaustible. And the solar power, solar energy, the electricity that the sun is showering down on us, on half the planet, all the time. Showering on 12 hours a day on any one particular place, but 24 hours a day it's shining on the Earth, the solar energy, all that electricity and thermal energy from the sun. And yet we keep burning gasoline and oil. So we need to do this. This is our goal. This is our task. We have to get working on these things. And there are plenty of people who are actually devoting their intelligence and their minds to working on these problems and creating solutions, inventing, developing, making solutions of electrical vehicles that work, and solar panels and wind turbines. And yet there's all this other fucking mentality of this resistance. This reactionary mentality says, oh no, anything that's good must be bad. Anything that's good must be bad. We have to be fighting, we have to fight and be angry against anything that's good. Oh, here's something that's going to keep us from having to burn gasoline into the air and polluting the air. Here's something that's going to prevent pollution. Let's get angry about it. Let's get angry not about the pollution, but about the thing that's going to eliminate the pollution. Let's get angry about it. Let's brand these people as crazy communist traitors, as unpatriotic. There's always enough people to have that fucking reactionary mentality. That's anytime there's somebody trying to do something good, let's call them a crazy subversive. That's basically it. Call them a crazy subversive, anybody that's trying to find a solution. So it's not bad enough that we're simply too lazy to try to work on the solutions. Most of us. A few people are willing to work on the solutions, but it's not enough that we're too lazy to do it ourselves. But then we have to go stigmatizing and bashing those few people who are courageous enough, intelligent enough, dedicated enough to actually be creating solutions. Those people have to be attacked and torn down and say, oh, you're bad, you're evil, you're doing the devil's work. You're doing the devil's work because you're trying to stop pollution. You're doing the devil's work because you're trying to save animals. You're trying to save the planet. And you're a bad person. You're a crazy person. You're a kook. We have to call you crazy things. We have to call you a tree hugger. We have to call you a liberal. We have to call you a this or a that. Because that's the fucking mentality. And fighting that mentality is like the ongoing task. And when you get so worn out from having to fight this all every day, then you eventually get worn down and you say, you know what, I have a headache. I don't have the energy for dealing with this today. I'm just going to stay in bed, pull the covers over my head, and not have to even worry about trying to understand how people can be so fucking stupid. And at that point you give up. At that point you start saying, well, gee, I don't know. What do I think? I don't know what I think. I don't think anything. Don't bother me. Don't talk to me. I don't want to have to explain anything. I don't want to have to explain myself. I don't have to sort things out. I don't want to have to argue. Goddamn fucking arguing. Spend your whole fucking life always having to fucking argue because all the reactionary, all the reactionary, obstructionist mentalities love to fucking argue you to death. Argue, argue, argue. Every fucking day, every fucking thing, no matter what it is. Argue, argue, argue. Make everything into a fucking argument. So I guess what makes me think of these things is when I'm seeing these people who are courageous and dedicated enough that they've been working on these inventions. Same things that I thought of decades ago. Decades ago I thought of, well, suppose you could have collapsible automobiles. Suppose you could have, suppose you could use a gyroscope. Now I wasn't quite sure how you would use a gyroscope in an automobile or any kind of a vehicle, but I had the feeling that it would be useful. And here it is. It's a way that keeps a motorcycle standing up on two wheels.